Sri Gupta further argued that in the present case, what was prayed for was a writ of quo warranto, and in fact the election of the appellant was not called in question. It was argued that since the writ petitioners came to know about the appellant not belonging to the scheduled caste, and since the post of the chairperson was reserved only for the scheduled caste, therefore the High Court was justified in entering into that question as to whether he really belongs to scheduled caste. In short, the learned counsel argued that independent of the election of the appellant as a ward member or as a person, his caste itself was questioned in the writ petition only with the objective to see whether he could continue as the chairperson. This argument is clearly incorrect, as the continuance of the appellant as the chairperson was not dependent upon something which was posterior to the appellant's election. So, as chairperson, it is not as if some event had taken place after the election of the appellant which created a disqualification to continue as the chairperson. The continuance of the appellant as the chairperson depended directly on his election, which election was available only to the person belonging to the scheduled caste. It is an admitted position that ward number 8 was reserved for scheduled caste, and so also the post of chairperson. Therefore, the indirectly worded what was in challenge in reality was the validity of the election of the appellant. According to the writ petitioners, the appellant could not have been elected as a ward member, nor could he be elected as the chairperson, as he did not belong to the scheduled caste. We can understand the eventuality where a person who is elected as a scheduled caste candidate renounces his caste after the elections by conversion to some other religion. Then a valid writ petition for quo warranto could certainly lie, because then it is not the election of such person which would be no child in challenge, but his subsequently continuing in his capacity as a person belonging to a particular caste. The counsel for the appellant rightly urged that the question of caste and the election are so inextricably connected that they cannot be separated. Therefore, when the writ petitioners challenged the continuation of the appellant on the ground that he is not belonging to a particular caste, when they in fact challenged is the validity of the election of the appellant, though apparently the petition is for the writ of quo warranto, again merely because the appellant was described as being a Christian in the service record, did not mean that the appellant was actually a person professing Christian religion. It was not, after all, known as to who had given those details, and further as to whether the details in reality were truthful or not. It would be unnecessary for us to go into the aspect whether the petitioner in reality is a Christian, for the simple reason that this issue was never raised at the same time of his election. While dealing with a claim petition in terms of Section 166 of the Motor Vehicles Act 1988, a tribunal stricto sensu is not bound by the pleadings of the parties, its function being to the determine the amount of fair compensation in the event an accident has taken place by reason of negligence of that driver of a motor vehicle. It is true that occurrence of an accident having regard to the provisions contained in section 166 of the act is a sine qua non for entertaining a claim petition, but that would not mean that despite evidence to the effect that death of the claimant's predecessor had taken place by reason of an accident caused by a motor vehicle, the same would be ignored only on the basis of a post-mortem report. The deceased was a constable. Death took place near a police station. The post-mortem report clearly suggests that the deceased died of a brain injury. The place of accident is not far from the police station. It is therefore difficult to believe the story of the driver of the bus that he slept in the bus and in the morning found a dead body wrapped in a blanket. If the death of a constable has taken place earlier, it is wholly unlikely that his dead body in a small town like Dharampur would remain undetected throughout the night, particularly when it was lying at a bus stand and near a police station. Learned Tribunal, in our opinion, has rightly proceeded on the basis that apparently there was absolutely no reason to falsely implicate the respondent numbers 2 and 3 claimant. Was not at the place of occurrence. She therefore might not be aware of the details as to how the accident took place, but the fact that the first information report had been lodged in relation to an accident could not have been ignored. Some discrepancies in the evidences of the claimant's witnesses might have occurred, but the core question before the tribunal and consequently before the High Court was as to whether the bus in question was involved in the accident or not. For the purpose of determining the said issue, the court was required to apply the principle underlying burden of proof in terms of the provisions of Section 106 of the Indian Evidence Act as to whether a dead body wrapped in a blanket had been found at the spot at such an early hour, which was required to be proved by the respondent numbers 2 and 3. In a situation of this nature, the tribunal has rightly taken a holistic view of the matter. It was necessary to be borne in mind that strict proof of an accident caused by a particular bus in a particular manner may not be possible to be done by the claimants. The claimants were merely to establish their case on the touchstone of preponderance of probability. The standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt could not have been applied.